Tag TV and Tag Radio. Be seen and heard by both technology users and technology producers throughout the state of Georgia and around the world. Low cost, big benefits, powerhouse online branded video and audio has arrived. Tag TV, Tag Radio, there's a lot more to know. This edition of Tech Talk is brought to you by GlobalSpeak.com, new media consultants, corporate video and audio communications, video and audio production and distribution, live and virtual event production. Tag TV and Tag Radio is a service of GlobalSpeak.com, creatively delivering powerful marketing, video, and audio solutions. Experts predict that every enterprise-wide, will soon have to deploy mobile devices across corporate and apps quickly and in scale to remain globally competitive. Did you even know you could automate all the tasks that make a mobile device ready for business use? Or that you could scale that process across hundreds to thousands of devices at a time? Standardized security across all devices, monitor devices 24/7 for any exception, even manage mobile device and apps individually instead of manually, automatically. What if you could manage a diverse mobile fleet of Apple iOS, Google Android, BlackBerry, Symbian, or Windows mobile devices on any carrier or any network anywhere in the world? Greetings, everyone. It's Thursday, December 15th, 2011, and this is one Tech Talk you will not want to miss. It's a game changer, and that's a good description. With Technology Association of Georgia President Tino Mantella, your special guest host, Becky Biggs, Tag Director of Public Relations and Georgia's Technology Evangelist. The Tech Talk goes mobile device management with Alan Dabbiere, former founder of Manhattan Associates, the world's leading supply chain execution software company, and now chairman of the exciting, rapidly growing AirWatch, a leader in the enterprise-wide mobile device and WAN management solutions. In 1990, Alan founded Manhattan Associates and served as president and CEO till the end of '99. After the company's successful initial public offering in '98, he served the company as chairman of the board through 2003. Today, Manhattan Associates is a global company with 2,000 employees and more than $337 million in revenue. Who should consider mobility management? What is the future for enterprise-wide deployment of disruptive technologies? Big thinkers, venture capitalists, entrepreneurial executives, listen up. It's a tech talk on not just what's now, but what's going to happen real fast. As Tag Technology Evangelist Becky Biggs goes inside AirWatch and speaks with its dynamic visionary and uberly successful entrepreneur, Alan Dabbiere.
Hi, Alan. Thank you very much for joining us today on Tech Talk.
Hi. Thank you very much for having me on the show.
We're very excited to have you here, especially since you represent one of Georgia's fastest-growing companies here, and a company that started actually out of Georgia. So before we get started, tell us a little bit more about AirWatch.
Great. Well, we are a provider of mobile device management, and this is the software that enterprises of all sizes are using to secure and deploy smartphones. And, it's just such an explosive industry. When you think that there, really almost wasn't a smartphone business 3 or 4 years ago, and then it's really been in the last 1 to 2 years that enterprises have been really embracing this technology, and it's having tremendous productivity gains in the enterprise. And so AirWatch is a company that helps these companies securely deploy these devices, making sure that all their enterprise data is protected and letting employees get the productivity they want with the choice that they want in the kinds of smartphones that they use. It's a really exciting industry.
It is very exciting, and I think I read recently that there's estimated to be over 5 billion mobile phones in use today. So there's a lot of opportunity for the business world, but we also know that it creates a number of challenges. As you were talking there, you mentioned a few terms that are specifically to the enterprise mobility world, and I was wondering, could you explain to us, to our listening audience, what exactly is mobile device management, which I've also heard called MDM, mobile application management, and mobile security?
Great. Well, our view is that these things all come together a little bit, but mobile device management is the ability to configure the devices in a way and manage them centrally. So if you think of some of the special sauce that BlackBerry specifically had for their devices, this is really the piece of software that's stepping in where that left off and allowing companies to manage and configure all forms of devices from a single console and support those end users. And then mobile application management is really the sister to mobile device management. This is the ability to push out the software that people are using. So when I start to write enterprise applications, or if I've got specific applications, either that the enterprise is building or that they want off iTunes or Marketplace, and I want to push those down to the device, this is the area of software that does that and then continues to upgrade all of that software. And then mobile security puts a wrapper around all of this, so that where companies have spent so much money with data loss prevention software, we are taking those concepts and applying them to the mobile world, so that you haven't gone and spent all this money trying to secure your data, and then suddenly you create a place for it to leak out through the smartphone.
It's interesting that you say that. I know that Georgia has a huge information security sector, and there's a lot of challenges that we hear about on the PC, especially when it comes to spam and email. What are some of the biggest challenges that companies are encountering when deploying mobility management and the security of that?
Well, I mean, it's amazing. You think of how hard it is to secure these laptops and the desktop, and sometimes those are right inside your enterprise. And yet you take that same problem and put it on the road. So now I've got a whole new class of devices that are brand new. Enterprises don't have nearly as much experience with them. And secondly, they're leaving the enterprise. And the second challenge with this is that very often in the desktop world or the laptop world, the enterprise controls it. So, I gave you that device, so I can tell you exactly what you're going to do on it. Now, in the smartphone world, more and more people are bringing their own device to work and hooking it up and using that for email and for different corporate resources. So now that same device is being shared by the individual for all of his personal use as well as the enterprise. So now you've got to take that device and give it two personalities, the corporate and the personal, and defend both of those. And we use the expression that mobility is death by 1,000 cuts. Every one of these devices that gets deployed needs to be configured and managed, and applications set up, and content being pushed out. The end user needs to be supported. And I'll tell you, for the enterprise, it's hard enough to do that for one device, but when you multiply that by 1,000 or 10,000 or 100,000, it becomes a real challenge.
I can definitely imagine that. Now at TAG, we work with companies of all different sizes. We have everything from the small startup companies to large corporations. So who should actually consider mobility management?
We think it's anybody who's got a phone. If you believe that your data is secure, I've seen companies with 10 or 20 employees. They've got salespeople, and therefore they've got proposals that are going out. We work with relatively small hedge funds. A great example would be a company like New Enterprise Associates. This is a company with $11 billion under management, but they've only got 200 employees. But they'll tell you that any email can be a $50 million lawsuit. On the other end of the spectrum, we've got companies like Lowe's, the hardware store. They're rolling out 65,000 devices to every store associate and every store manager. These are two very different problems, but at the end of the day, any company that is deploying smartphones or letting employees use smartphones and get email and attachments, and they feel that that information is important to them, well, they really should be managing those devices. And in the industry, there are systems that are being provided that are in software as a service mode, so that you don't have to spend a lot of money to protect that data. So just like who really should have virus protection, I would argue anybody with a computer. Who should have mobile security, it really is any company that is deploying smartphones.
That definitely makes sense. So could you tell me a little bit more, what are some of the biggest drivers that companies need to consider for MDM and MAM solutions today?
Well, a huge driver is the Bring Your Own Device program. I mean, how often do you see somebody and they sit down and they pull out of their pocket their 2 or their 3 or their 4 devices and they're like, oh, I hate carrying these things. This one's for work and this one's personal. And then they go through the whole list. Well, everybody wants to reduce this down to one device. It is so inconvenient to have your personal email on one phone and get personal phone calls on it, and then you're getting your corporate email and calendar on the other one, and none of that seems to mix, and then you're worried about charging them. So more and more companies, I should say individuals and employees, are trying to get companies to allow the employee to use one device. And on the corporate side, they don't think it makes sense for the employee to pay for a data plan and for the company to pay for a data plan. So more and more, they're pushing out and saying, as an employee, we will give you a certain amount of money per month, but you can buy your own technology. I don't want to be responsible that when the new iPhone 5 comes out, all of a sudden it seems like every employee drives over their phone or loses it in the saltwater lake or it drops in the fish tank and everybody says that they need a new phone. They want to be out of that business. You buy your technology, we will give you a certain amount of money, and that way when you go to Europe for a 2-week vacation and forget to turn your data plan off and get a $500 phone bill, it's not my phone bill as a company. And these are the real things that are happening to companies today. Employees bring that device internationally on a personal vacation, but they don't turn off that data roaming plan. A big bill comes in. That's a very difficult conversation to have with the employee, how to get that money back. So bring your own devices, number one. Second is the applications. And we are working with companies like Medtronic, but all companies are starting to build tablet applications and iPhone applications and time and expense applications and using VoIP applications on these devices. And none of these devices natively have an ability to both configure and push applications to these devices or push the upgrades. And so MDM and mobile application management allows you to really configure those devices through the life cycle. And the third real driver is the security and making sure that these devices get configured correctly, that encryption is turned on, that there's a passcode that's required, that through the entire life cycle of that device, we're making sure that it's not getting compromised or jailbroken, that people aren't trying to do something nefarious, or that somebody doesn't just lose the device and all of a sudden some very sensitive corporate data can be compromised. So these are some of the big drivers we're seeing.
And those are definitely very good points. I know that we've definitely seen that. Everybody has different devices in their hands, and so I know it's probably created challenges for the IT departments to keep up with all of those different devices and manage all of that. What are some of the things that enterprises should consider before they implement an MDM or MAN solution?
Well, number one, they want to look at their corporate infrastructure and see where are the points of integration that they want to have. You don't want mobile device management running as a whole standalone system, because if you've already organized your employees using Active Directory or organizational structure or some other identity management system, you don't want to have to reorganize or re-enter all of that. So you want to know how have you organized your employees? What are your corporate policies? You want to make sure that if you're turning on things like GPS tracking or some feature of mobile device management, that you're not breaking any privacy rules, and that you are flexible enough with your employees, because you don't want to be pushing, you don't want to be too draconian or too limited on what you're allowing employees to do, because they're going to start finding ways around it, or they're going to revolt, if you will. So setting up great policies and understanding how employees use these devices, what kinds of policies are going to let them get the most out of it. You may not do certain things on an employee-owned device that you may restrict on an employer-provided device. All of those. And then finally, as you're actually selecting a provider, you want to make sure that they've got software that is very flexible, that can support those different groupings, because not every phone needs to be secured the same way. Not every employee is going to have the same configuration and applications and content delivered down to that device. And so you want to make sure that the company you work with is viable for the long term. Today there's something like 60 mobile device management players, and I'm going to argue that not more than 4 or 5 of them are even going to survive. You want to make sure that you're with somebody who's really providing the breadth of technology and capability, not just for today, but for your future. the ability to have secure content lockers and secure browsers and broad capability and flexibility in the way every employee is treated, and then lots of automated processes. So if a device does get jailbroken, somebody doesn't have to identify that and react to it. The workflow in the system automatically isolates that device and takes the appropriate action, and so that this does not become a huge burden to the IT department. These are some real, so how are you going to staff the ability to have all these phones in the field?
Those are some very great insights, Alan. Thank you very much for sharing those with us. One final thing that we're always kind of curious here at TAG about is, why is it so important to you to have your operations based here in Georgia? I know that you've been in Georgia for a long time, and I believe you were on the advisory board for the Georgia Institute of Technology. So what's important to you about operating a business here in Georgia?
Well, I'm I've got a little interesting background. I moved my first company out of California to Georgia. So I originally founded Manhattan Associates out on the West Coast. And we came to Georgia with 30 employees, and within 3 years we were 700 people in public. And I will tell you that we would never have been able to sustain that kind of growth without Georgia Tech and the great workforce here. So that was a really important item for us. Second was transportation. And the fact that Georgia's got a great airport, we can get anywhere. We can actually get people on a plane early in the morning so that they don't have to go the night before. We can get people home late so that they don't spend extra nights on the road. So quite frankly, the transportation network, this great workforce, and quite frankly, the East Coast time zone. Because we are helping people around the world, it's a great time zone for having a central global headquarters. And even though we've got offices around the world, I have found from living on the West Coast that the Eastern time zone gives us a real advantage in supporting all of the United States, but also Europe and all over globally. And so we find this an ideal place to take a software company, grow it, and that Georgia is a great environment for that.
Thank you. Thank you for explaining that to us. Before we go, is there anything else that we haven't covered that you want people to know about AirWatch or about the mobility enterprise world?
Well, we do believe that people underestimate how dangerous these devices are, the amount of data that's being put out on them. They're really no longer phones that have email, but they're really small computers. Use that expression, death by 1,000 cuts. And, we do believe that somebody is going to have a horrible accident with their data, and that nobody wants to be the TJ Maxx of mobility, if you will, and have that happen to them. So we think people really and truly need to take a look at these policies, look at how much data is being released, and yet harness the power of mobility and what these devices are doing for huge productivity advancements in companies.
Great. Well, Alan, again, thank you so much for joining us today. I think that you've provided some great insights that the technology community is really going to appreciate, and I know we definitely appreciate all of the things that you're doing here for Georgia's technology community, and look forward to hearing more from AirWatch in the future.
Well, great. We can be found at air-watch.com and be reached at info@airwatch.com. So if there's any questions from the viewers and listeners to this show, we would welcome them coming in and contacting us directly.
Thanks, Alan.
All right. Thank you so much.